And then this interesting map of Oklahoma. None of my people in my family had had a college education, and so you really didn't know. The counselor at Muskogee Central High School counseled against us going to OU to be a little frog in a big pond, whereas you could be a big frog in a little pond elsewhere. And I thought I might be able to be a big frog in a big pond. Like many things in life, the unexpected comes up. This is the LBJ Ranch here, and that's in the 1964 campaign. I ended up being in charge of putting together an old-fashioned train tour through the South for Lady Bird Johnson called the Lady Bird Special. Mrs. Johnson said to her husband after the campaign, there's a fellow that you ought to take a look at and get onto your staff. And so that's how I ended up at the White House on President Johnson's staff. This was at our wedding. That's President and Mrs. Johnson, my wife. This is up in the... First of all, the White House was probably one of the best experiences I've ever had. I was 25 when I went there. I was deputy to what they called today the Chief of Staff. And then when I was 28, I took his place. And at 29, we had left office. And so I came back to Oklahoma. Olivia and I came and settled in Tulsa. I practiced some law, started a little business, and then ran for Congress. I had a speech in Springfield here about a month or so ago, and wasn't that impulsive? I had the blessing of having a city editor in high school who was just tough as nails, and I learned that you don't make excuses. How you doing? He says when the people pick up the paper the next day, they don't say, oh, that was too bad, the story was terrible, but we understand Jones didn't get enough sleep or what have you. They want to know the news. And so I learned that there are no excuses. The final product is out there with your name on it, and it better be good. I was an assistant whip early on in my career, and then was on the Ways and Means Committee, and perhaps the most difficult one was when I was elected chairman of the Budget Committee, and that coincided with the beginning of the Reagan administration. The Reagan administration and I had a difference of opinion on deficits, and there was that clash between their economic policies and what I thought was better for the country. And it was a very enjoyable time. When I left Congress, President Clinton called me and said he wanted me to be ambassador to Mexico. I said, Mr. President, I haven't the slightest interest in being an ambassador. And he said, well, NAFTA is in trouble. Again, going back to my Lyndon Johnson days, he said, if the President of the United States, Democrat or Republican, ever calls and says he needs you, you do it for your country. And then, of course, that's with Bill Clinton. That was when I was ambassador. Mexico, shortly after NAFTA was passed, got into a peso devaluation situation that almost bankrupted them. And so I was working with Larry Summers and Tim Geithner and others to come up with a rescue package that would save Mexico from being bankrupt. It did succeed, and the interesting thing is because the way we structured it, they paid back the entire package to the United States within 8 months, and we made something like $800 million in profit. Something that I learned is that Washington is not a bunch of statues and stone and historical monuments, but it's ordinary people faced with pretty extraordinary tasks, and they're doing it. And you know, I come from a basically rural part of the country, and yet I saw ordinary people up here doing extraordinary things, and I thought, I can do that, and I hope these kids say, I can do that too.